Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 371 for Monday, October 13th, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including a video version on YouTube and Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, approaching at phenomenal speed, is Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
I've been called many things in my life, but fast is not one of them. Strong, but just not a speedy person. Even when I was running, still not a fast person. But certainly not as fast as F1 racers, as driving around in Forza Horizon, as I often do, and talking about Three Body Problem, which is a lot slower than I'd want it to be on Netflix, but it looks like the book that Johnny's reading is picking up. So if you want to hear about all that kind of stuff, check out the Render Distance. It's the extended version of the program. We talk about what we've been up to, hanging out with family over the weekend, that kind of stuff. Just kind of warm up the voices and fill you in on a little bit of behind the scenes. And you can get that at the Spawn Chunks on Patreon. It's one of the benefits to our patrons. You support us on the platform, and then you get access to 20 to 30 minutes of content every single week. In addition, there's also the monthly Minecraft Hangout, where we talk to you folks about what you've been up to in Minecraft. And then the quarterly Hangouts, where we talk about the downloads, the features, the behind-the-scenes plans for the podcast in the future. All that is over at patreon.com/thespawnchunks.
This week we have some exciting news. We have our first look at playable Mobs of Mayhem, or Mounts of Mayhem content. So we'll be diving into the Nautilus a little bit and swinging the spear in today's discussion. But first, as always, we're going to kick off with what's new in our Minecraft lives. So Joel, what's new with you on the Citadel?
So I have been puttering around on the Mushroom Island, and I have been a little frustrated in that I've not really decided on any kind of design aesthetic. I have farms that I want to build, but I'm trying to still figure out the best place to build them. And so I really haven't finished or accomplished much. I have finished the creeper farm, which technically works, but very, very slowly. I had miscalculated when I used the mini HUD mod to put in a spawning sphere. So it's a 128 block radius sphere that you can kind of create a hologram of, similar to like Matica, and just kind of give yourself a visual representation of okay, things I build within this sphere are going to be loaded when I'm in my main area. So the staging area where I've got all my chests and shulker boxes and stuff, and I tend to putter around a lot. I wanted to build these farms within range of that so that I'm, loading them when they're working. Turns out that giant lush cave is the corner of the sphere goes into the corner of the cave. So the whole cave is really not loaded. So dilemma, do I maintain my staging area in the center of the world of the Mushroom Island, or do I move the main base to be directly over the lush cave, which then everything underneath it would be loaded and to be fine? So there's a dilemma there because I'm not really sure. The perfectionist in me wants to build in the middle of the island and then kind of spider web out from there, but I also want these farms to load while I'm around. So maybe I build a different creeper farm. And so that's what I went doing. I went looking for other caves and things under the island. So what I did was I just kind of mapped out where that 128 radius sphere was, just with a couple of markers on the surface, and then started digging down 30 blocks at a time and then creating cross tunnels and just kind of seeing what I ran into and following any lush caves that I ran into. I found a skeleton spawner, I found a geode, all of which are almost directly under the middle section of the island. So there are a few things I could do now that will be running when I'm not, paying attention. And I don't really want to spend the time to set up a skeleton spawner, because I don't want to just stand there to load the spawner to have it work. I want things to be working in the background as I'm doing other things. So while it might be something that I address later on for another purpose, we found a zombie spawner at some point, and that's the kind of thing where maybe I do a copper farm that, turning into a drowned farm that's powered by a spawner. I've done that before. So there are some uses for the spawners, but right now I don't have any. And so exploring was fun. It was kind of nice to see how many lush caves there were. It was wild to see some of the lush caves that I would run into that would actually connect to the main lush cave, which is way up in the northwest of the island. So in a way, I'm glad I'm on the Mushroom Island, because it's so nice to walk around on the surface and not have to worry about anything. But I've also, because of 118 and all the different biomes vertically, I do still have the same problem of like having to light up caves in order to get anything to work under the surface. Now, the good news is I don't have to build these mob farms over the ocean outside of the island. I can still build them within the boundaries. I just have to make sure that I'm lighting things up. But I did find a large enough lush cave that I could make a small glow squid farm. I could potentially move a creeper farm down there and have that happen in the background. So I'm just kind of figuring out where I want that stuff to be and where I want the goods to go. So at some point, I kind of have to bite the bullet and create something like a main area, a main storage base, some sort of central hub. I was thinking about using amethyst crystals and amethyst blocks and then creating something larger that looks like it might be powered. I added a beacon because of all the digging I was doing. And now I'm starting to think about, oh, how cool would it be if I had like different beacon colors, or maybe made them purple and have it look like the beam goes through a crystal. Like there's a bunch of different things I'm trying to imagine, but I'm also trying not to look up other Minecraft builds from sci-fi, and I'm trying to let the environment influence what I'm doing, much like I did in West Hill, where like the landscape kind of dictated where the town would go, where the moat would go, like all that kind of stuff. And so with this, I just haven't really seen much, because the unfortunate downside of a mushroom island is that it's pretty boring on the surface. It's just mushrooms, and like rolling hills. There's not really anything too extreme that says like, "Ooh, build something cool here." So I'm kind of waiting for inspiration to hit me. And in the meantime, just kind of like puttering around. One thing I did get to was building a bamboo smelter, and that was more of a off the cuff. I just want to see if I could smelt maybe 2 stacks of items at a time, because I started to run out of glass when I was working on the creeper farm. I thought, it'd be nice to be able to just like get a couple stacks whenever I needed to, and just ran into a bottleneck of not wanting to overpower it because it's a temporary build. I didn't want to build something ginormous, and so the trickle effect of bamboo into the hoppers for the fuel wasn't fast enough to smelt anything. So they would start to smelt and then would run out of fuel, and then would start to smelt and run out of fuel. So that did kind of give me an idea where like, okay, well, if I build something bigger than this, then really the way to go is going to be to have crafters turning the bamboo into blocks and then planks. And I'm going to have to do some math and figure out like what is the object in the bamboo crafting pipeline that gets the most items smelted that I can craft the easiest. Now, with crafters and bamboo, like it's super simple. Like it's just, to get things broken down or recombined and stuff, it's very straightforward. So that shouldn't be an issue. And I was trying to do like a balanced ratio where I wasn't like overproducing, but I feel like it might be, for the sake of ease of mind, just build a big bamboo farm to the point where it's probably going to be overpowered for what you need. And therefore your furnaces are just always going to be stocked with like a stack of planks or a stack of bamboo blocks or like whatever it is that you're doing. And then you just know you can walk up, throw a stack in. My eventual goal will be to have 64 furnaces, to just be able to like do a stack in the time it takes to smelt one item. And so for me, I just have to figure out where I want to put that, because that's not a small build. Once I do it, I'm not going to want to redo it. And because I don't have any design ideas, I'm also just like, well, where do I put that? So because I want it to be convenient, you'd want it to be like off your main area. Well, where's my main area? So right now I'm just kind of like puttering, which in a way is freeing. And it's nice to kind of explore and have discoveries like stumbling upon a geode, finding a really cool lush cave. That kind of stuff is great. But at the same time, coming fresh out of West Hill, I still have that mentality of like, I haven't built anything. Like I haven't really designed anything cool looking in like a month. And so it's weird to kind of like retrain your brain. Like, no. Like you can spend some time and get the lay of the land. There's no rush, but it's kind of hard to kind of like retrain the way that you work creatively.
Yeah, you're moving from that big project mindset to another big project, but something that you can allow to take its time. And I recognize that that's a difficult challenge. It's also a challenge, I think, to go from an aesthetic that is, while obviously you're taking like a slightly more fantastical approach to some of the materials that you use in West Hill, you're still doing it from the perspective of this is a medieval town. And I think a lot of people know what medieval is from having, studied a little bit of history, whereas sci-fi is all going to be imagined. And so there's a much more like self-imposed creative exercise there, where yes, you can plan the layout of a town like West Hill, and you can plan like occasional, feature houses that have something different, and use Minecraft's resources that don't necessarily have an analog in the real world, but you're still going to be constructing houses out of timber and stone and the kind of stuff that says medieval reads that way at a glance. Whereas with science fiction, you sort of have to choose a lane. You know, there are so many different possible approaches, and that's if you're taking inspiration from pre-existing works, if you're looking at concept art, if you're doing it based on a specific science fiction universe. If you're going entirely original, then there's another step of creativity that exists beyond that, where you sort of have to understand in your own head, okay, what are the rules regarding technology? What kind of materials are they using to build, and why? How do I best simulate those materials in Minecraft, which doesn't have a whole range of like metallic stuff going on that's very easy to build with? And then, you know, how can you sort of blur the lines between those things to make something that's satisfying for you to look at, says sci-fi to you, but still, like, you know, is something functional for Minecraft? So it's a pretty intense challenge, and that's why it feels like shifting gears from West Hill a little bit is going to be a harder challenge than just going from one set of builds to another, right?
Yeah, and material is another thing, because, you know, when I think about what I want to build something out of and what color palette I want to use, like ultimately I think like, well, wait a minute, if I want to start building like roads, for example, I think, okay, well, black concrete would be cool, but like I need to have something else in there because I don't have any other block types. Like I just have square blocks, where if I did something with polished deep slate, which I've used in West Hill to look like metal, like it looks like cast iron, I could make it look like black metal, I think, in context in a sci-fi zone, because then I get stairs and slabs and walls and those kind of things in deep slate. So I need to kind of figure out like, what are my lights, what are my darks. Quartz and other blocks like that, and calcite might be fun for like slabs and stairs for quartz to kind of get different shapes. So I want to try and figure that out. And unfortunately, like I think a lot of sci-fi in Minecraft ends up being white with color accents, because quartz is one of those blocks that gives you those sub-block variants, and there's not a lot of other blocks that do. We now have pale oak in the game, so like a stripped pale oak log, a pale oak trapdoor from the side can give you some different details. So that kind of stuff works out okay, but like there's not a lot of variants. And so when you go to look up stuff, and again, like I've tried not to do this too much, but I kind of thought like, okay, well, what could I just look at in thumbnails on a quick Google search? But unfortunately, you get something where in Minecraft, there's trends. And so if somebody that's really popular has done a sci-fi build in the last 5 years, then everybody starts emulating it. And so then when your search results come back, everything looks the same. And it's like, okay, well, now I know what I don't want to do, which is emulate this popular trend, even though it looks cool. Like there's a lot of builds out there that are kind of like flat roof, kind of mid-century modern sci-fi, the kind of like 1960s Fantastic Four sci-fi, where it's like a white building with like orange stripes on it, or blue outlines around a hangar bay, like that kind of stuff. It looks very Hanna-Barbera, stuff that you might see from the Jetsons, or I want to say early like Mass Effect stuff.
Yeah, Mass Effect is
on
probably
the ground.
The point of reference I would choose for like modular builds and that kind of thing. Yeah.
That kind of thing, right? So that's the kind of stuff that's tricky. And the other thing is that like I'm also just fairly literal as a person with my designing. Like I want the designs to have a function. I find that it informs my art to like know what this thing is doing, to like inform the shapes or the materials or whatever. But then I'm in a sci-fi area where like the rules are kind of imagined. Like you said, like I could make something float if I want to. It doesn't have to be sturdy. Like the buildings could be on jets and hovering. Like I don't have to have them on the ground. And like I haven't really given myself that mental freedom yet. I'm still kind of like exercising that. I won't say, I guess release is like the best way to say it, to from West Hill, which is like everything had to look sturdy, grounded, like it wasn't going to fall over, not floating, right? So it's a weird shift, you know, which is cool. Like it's fun to have that challenge again in Minecraft.
I think the first question I would start with is, are you doing aliens arriving on our planet, or are you imagining that the Mushroom Island is a different planet and humans have gone there? Like, which way round do you imagine that? Or have you not made a decision on that yet?
I definitely feel like it would be more fun and more creative to imagine the Mushroom Island as an alien landscape. That was definitely, I think, the reason I chose a Mushroom Island, because it's already halfway there. Like it looks different than everything else in Minecraft. The purple kind of mycelium ground feels like No Man's Sky, right? Mushrooms everywhere, that kind of stuff. And if I wanted to do any custom biomes, then again, like there's not going to be a forest 20 blocks away removing the suspension of disbelief. So I'm really wanting to try something like that. And the other thing that I want to try and do is make sure I get a lot of color in there too. And that's where I think some custom biomes might be fun. Custom trees, make it look really alien. There's a huge coral reef everywhere around this mushroom island. And so grabbing some coral, having like little custom coral trees, you know, like with water pockets inside so everything stays alive. Like that kind of stuff could be really fun to design. And not that I, you know, I've kind of had my fill of landscaping for a little while. So like that's last on the list right now. But like I definitely want to think about it as an alien planet. And I don't know whether it's going to be humans settling. Like I don't know how specific I want to be. I think sometimes being vague about it can be helpful in terms of like, is it people or is it just like a different kind of society, or how advanced are they? Like that kind of stuff could be just kind of fun to mess around with. I do think I want to maintain player scale, because I think walking around builds like this is going to be fun as a player to kind of see, okay, cool, here's a vehicle that looks like I could pilot or sit in or something like that. That could be fun. But at the same time, I have the opportunity to build at scale. So like if I wanted to do something ginormous, like a giant, you know, control room, or you think about like whenever you've seen the inside of like the Death Star on Empire Strikes Back with the power core, and like there's ships flying around in the central core of this giant space station. So like I don't want to build anything that large, but having large rooms in Minecraft, whenever I've seen that done or done it myself in like our Nether hub, it's really satisfying at the end of the day. Say like, okay, I built this entire thing to encase this one experience, and I feel like that's going to be something I do for sure.
For sure, yeah. There's a lot of questions to answer in the meantime, though, so looking forward to future updates on that.
So that's me. What have you been up to?
I have been grounded a little bit more in Minecraft mechanics this week. I have basically finished up my Copper Golem assisted storage. So this consists of another plus-shaped set of intersecting corridors, which have chests on either side for bulk storage, and then above them barrels into which the Copper Golem automatically sorts all of the crafted blocks of that block type. So I started with the wood types. I now have categories for a bunch of other stuff. There's some more organic blocks, and some of those don't necessarily have like stairs and slabs, but I'm storing like the moss carpet and the azalea leaves and stuff like that above the moss. I'm storing the dirt variants above the dirt, and, you know, sandstone and bricks and that kind of thing. I've also got all of the stone types pretty much accounted for. I've got a bunch of the other like craftable materials, things like quartz, prismarine, purpur, resin, like a few things that, especially if they're more colorful, I might end up using them a bit more in the architecture of the Windy City. And then all of the colored materials, which is like dyes, wool, glass, carpet, terracotta, and concrete, are all sorted into individual color filters. So the filters are built slightly differently on each setup, but there are, I think, a pretty similar approach to each one. The trick I found this week, and it's a fairly straightforward trick now that I say it out loud, but one of the things I've done to make sure that you don't end up losing a bunch of items inside the filter, the same way that you don't always want to keep like 40 plus items in one of those hopper item filters, I'm trying my best to make sure there aren't too many, like, you know, dyes or blocks of copper or whatever stored in the larger filters, especially when you're using the inventory of an entire chest and trying to generate a comparator signal out of that. I've used wooden shovels in place of anything that is a full stack of material. So in double chests, you need 3 stacks and 54 or 56 items to be present in a chest before it will generate a high enough comparator signal. But I've replaced that with 3 wooden shovels, and then the rest is all just items. And that means that the filter still generates the right amount of comparator signal for the copper golem to put one item in, and then it just kind of goes on through the filter from there. But you don't keep as much of the material inside the body of the filter. So wooden shovels have been instrumental to that, and I've just ended up replacing a ton of stuff in my filter system with very easily craftable, stackable items like that. Now I need to do more of the building work around it. I'm pretty happy with the interior. I've used a few shelves as like a fun gradient in some areas, just when it felt like it was getting like too much wood everywhere and needed a pop of color. The shelves are obviously still made of wood, but there's like, a lot of warmer accents and stuff that I can use in that. And on the outside, this is going to be part of the train station, which is the central hub around which, like, I arrive in the Windy City. That's where the Nether Portal is. But also, it's going to be in the center of town, and all of the buildings that I have planned are going to be around that. So I need a bit of good architectural reference for that before I get really stuck into building the train station exterior. But there's lots of great train stations in the UK and elsewhere that I can take a bit of inspiration from for that. The other thing I've been working on still in the background is the copper aging facility dig. And it's only the dig so far because I haven't had a chance to really get to work with the redstone side of things yet. But I want this entire room dug out to Y0, and then I need to move the beacon because I need to dig out a space of roughly the same size to accommodate the full circuitry that I have planned. But once again, this is for a massive redstone contraption, so the more the merrier in terms of space. And a lot of people are questioning why I'm not doing this on the surface, and the answer is because I don't want to leave like this giant redstone contraption out there that I then have to build a big shell around. I'm a lot happier just leaving it underground somewhere and decorating it slowly but surely, but then it being out of sight and out of mind when I don't have the capacity to work on a build that's going to potentially be like 180 by 220 blocks. It's huge. I'd much rather get the functionality sorted out, have it underground somewhere, and then decorate that space when I feel like I've got the time for it, really.
I'm running into a similar problem with things like the shulker box farm on the Citadel, where it's like it's not that big. It's 17 by 17. It's nowhere near the scale of David. But at the same time, I'm also like, how much of this do I want to see? Do I want to just encase it? Do I want to just put a big cube around it? Like it's big enough that I have to put something really large around it if it's going to have any kind of shape to it. If I'm just going to put a cube around it, I also have to put it another 8 or 9 blocks away from the edges so that it doesn't have anything that's spawnable, or have the inside be just like a dark room where like I can just put buttons on all the surfaces or something, which might look kind of cool. I don't know. There might be some fun thing that I could do inside of a containment unit or something like that, but I haven't figured that out yet. And not that I'm regretting building it on the surface, because it would have been a real pain to dig out a hole that size, but it's the same idea, right? Like anything that I build on the surface, I then have to decorate around, unless I want to expose the redstone circuitry and like have it be part of the build. And so I haven't figured out, what I want to do there yet. But I love seeing the dig though. Like I know it's a lot of work. I know how tedious it is. I did a perimeter like this for my witch farm, and it is very satisfying at the end to have this giant hole, this giant space. It always reminds me of Moria from Lord of the Rings. You're just in this giant underground chasm. You're just like, this is like, I made this. This was not here before, and it is here now. And I mean, as they say in Minecraft, diggy hole, right? Like it's just it's something very satisfying about that process. And for people that don't get it, you haven't tried it. Like
yes.
It's also a time commitment. Like if you're going to do it, like you have to understand what you're signing up for, because it's sometimes during the process you're just kind of like, like why did I sign up for this? But I find it very satisfying at the end. And I really like the storage system. Like I feel like it's bringing in that mix of bulk storage that everybody needs, but then removing the pain of manually sorting all these other little sub blocks, or the pain of like creating a bulk filter for everything. And like you realize quite quickly, I don't need a bulk filter for everything. Like I don't want this many stairs. I need like a few stacks of stairs in the barrel above the wood, block for your specific wood type. Like I think it's very, very cool. And it's pretty compact too. Like, I mean, in terms of like the external versus the internal, like your experience going up to the storage system is like very straightforward, and it's not like you're running all over, the place. Obviously it expands a bit behind, but I would still say small compared to larger sorting systems that I've seen, where there's like 10 or 20 blocks of redstone behind every wall of chests. Like this is more the same size as a standard bulk filter, and then I think the top filters for the copper golems is like a block or two shorter. Like it's not like it's a lot.
Yeah, no, it's really very straightforward. And I think the most important thing for me is that it's a system that I can understand, and I've always had a hard time adapting my brain to how multi-item filters work purely with redstone. And there are a couple of other really neat, like, fairly low-tech versions that I've seen. Etho, on this past season of Hermitcraft, had one where a hopper minecart kind of travels around a water stream in the background, but the water streams are vertical in some spaces, and it carries stuff over the top of hoppers, and then if the items don't end up getting put into a chest by a hopper, it goes around underneath them again, and the hopper minecart pulls them back in and then takes them to the next chest in that circuit and kind of like tests basically for whether or not it's stored in any of these chests, and it just has to like fill up the chest with dummy items basically to put in like a single item for each of those that you expect to be a stack later. And so that there's like fun systems like that don't have to be completely like redstone teched out, but the copper golem is a happy medium for me, where it's a mob whose behavior I think I understand. I've built the system for it, so I know that the golem isn't going to have a hard time adapting to a pre-existing storage setup, and the filter technology is not that different from the regular Impulse SV item filters. So I think it's working out really well for me so far, and I think the only problems might come with if I end up with a ton of items of a certain type, like I've made myself, 14 stacks of copper stairs that I just want to store in like a filter somewhere. Potentially that ends up exceeding the capacity of the filter, but it's really just a sign that I should return to this more often for all of the crafted items instead of doing as much crafting as I typically do on the fly. So yeah, we'll see how that works out for me long term. Lots of building still to do in the Windy City, including the outside of this storage system. So I'll be back with more updates on that for sure. For now, though, we should get on into the news, because that's the most exciting thing about this week, really. Minecraft Java Edition Snapshot 25W41A was published on Thursday, October 9th, after the 1.21.10 hotfix came out for the current version, the Copper Age drop. But on October 9th, we got 25W41A. The new features include the Nautilus and the Zombie Nautilus. The Nautilus is a new neutral aquatic mob which spawns in all ocean biomes. It attacks using a dash attack if provoked. Occasionally will attack pufferfish within range using said dash attack. And the skill, as the player rides it, is similar to camels, which is used by pressing the jump button. The Nautilus takes suffocation damage on land. As players ride it around, they get the Breath of the Nautilus effect, which pauses player oxygen consumption but does not replenish oxygen. Nautilus can be bred and tamed using pufferfish or a bucket of pufferfish. And a tamed Nautilus can be mounted using a saddle. With a saddle, it has a roaming restriction of 16 blocks, and without a saddle, has a roaming restriction of 32 blocks. So it operates similar to the Happy Ghast, where it will stay in its home area. The Zombie Nautilus is a new underwater mob that spawns with a drowned rider wielding a trident. A Zombie Nautilus is only hostile if ridden by a hostile mob, but it behaves similarly to the Nautilus in all other areas except that it cannot be bred. But players can ride the Zombie Nautilus as well, which is something that wasn't entirely clear after Minecraft Live. Nautilus armor was also added to the game. It's equipable on both the Nautilus and the Zombie Nautilus, which comes in copper, golden, iron, diamond, and netherite versions. The spear was also added in this snapshot, a new weapon that can be crafted in wood, stone, copper, iron, gold, diamond, and netherite versions. Each material has different stats for timing, influencing how fast they are to use. It has a minimum reach for damage, being too close to a target will actually yield no damage. It has an extended maximum reach compared to other tools and weapons. Typically it has two attacks, the jab and the charge. Zombies, husks, zombified piglins, and piglins can all spawn with the spear. So the jab attack is a quick press primary action button to use, like a simple left click like you'd be swinging a sword. There's a low damage attack with knockback when you jab. Cooldown between attacks is pretty standard for people who are used to using weapons in Minecraft. They have a similar kind of thing with the spear. Wooden spears have the fastest cooldown, and netherite has the slowest. It can hit multiple enemies with a single jab, and it does not destroy blocks. The charge attack is when you press and hold the secondary action button, usually the right-click button. Damage is based on the spear's material, the player's viewing angle, and the velocity of both the player and the target. When holding down the button, the attack goes through 3 stages before returning to idle. It is engaged when the spear is held down, it can deal damage, knockback, and even dismount mounted enemies if the speed is above the required threshold. You get tired after holding it that way for a while, which indicates the spear rotating to a vertical position and shaking. It can still deal damage and knockback, but not dismount foes. And then finally, disengaged when the spear points downwards and is lowered. The spear gives damage, but not knockback or dismount. The spear's range when used by mobs is half of that when used by players, but they can deal damage, dismount, and knockback at lower speeds than the players. Zombies, husks, and zombified piglins all know how to use this charge attack with the spear. It also added a unique enchantment called Lunge. It's a spear-exclusive enchantment which only affects the jab attack. When doing a jab attack with the Lunge enchantment, this propels the player horizontally in the view direction. The view angle needs to be perfectly leveled horizontally to achieve the maximum lunge distance, and this does significant durability damage to the spear. They've updated advancements to include the Nautilus, the zombie Nautilus, and the zombie horse, which we'll get onto in a second. How did we get here for all of the potion effects has been updated to include the Breath of the Nautilus effect. Best Friends Forever has now included taming the Nautilus, zombie Nautilus, and the zombie horse. The Parrots and the Bats also includes breeding the Nautilus. 2x2 also includes breeding the Nautilus. Monster Hunter now includes killing the zombie Nautilus. And the throwaway joke, take aim, and it spreads advancements can all be obtained using the Nautilus and the zombie Nautilus. Changes in 25W41A, zombies, husks, piglins, and zombified piglins can now hold spears. Piglins will consider golden spears as one of the items that they like and can be distracted by. Items will no longer bob when their durability changes, such as when losing durability from an attack or repaired by mending. Some changes have been made to debug renderers. The graphics mode, Fast, Fancy, and Fabulous, have been replaced with graphics presets with the same names. Cloud movement is now the same for all players on a server. Netherite armor points have been increased for the body slot from 11 to 19. All blocks in the world now have mip maps applied if enabled in video settings. Blocks that did not have mip maps before, such as different vines, rails, foliage apart from leaves, and more, should look better from higher distances. In addition, client FPS is expected to be higher for most players. Zombie horses now spawn naturally. They have a chance to spawn in plains and savanna biome types, with a zombie rider holding an iron spear. Zombie horses spawn in darkness and burn in sunlight, like other undead mobs. They do count towards the hostile mob cap and spawn with other hostile mobs, but they don't display any hostile behavior towards players. The hostility resides solely in the zombie rider. Untamed zombie horses despawn like other hostile mobs would. Tamed zombie horses are persistent and do not despawn. Zombie horses can be tamed in the same fashion as regular horses, then mounted and controlled by a player. They can be healed and tempted using red mushrooms. Tamed zombie horses can be equipped with a saddle and horse armor. Horse armor will protect zombie horses from sunlight damage. They normally have 25 health points, which is 12.5 hearts. Zombie horses have variable movement speed and jump strength, which is determined when they spawn, much like other horses. They drop 2 to 3 rotten flesh when killed, with an extra 0 to 1 for each level of looting. And zombies riding zombie horses now have a chance of dropping a red mushroom on death. There are a couple of changes to world generation, mostly governing where you can find some of the new items. Spears have been added to various loot chests around the world. Iron spears can be found along with buried treasure chests. Copper and iron spears can be found in weaponsmiths' chests in villages. Stone spears can be found in the chests with ocean ruins. And diamond spears can be found in bastion remnants and end city chests. Copper, iron, golden, and diamond Nautilus armor now have a chance to be found in buried treasure, ocean ruin, and shipwreck chests. In sounds, the anvil, destroy, land, place, and use sounds now play at a slightly lower volume. In accessibility changes, the keys used to access debug features can now be rebound. This is part of a new debug category in the keybinds screen. The debug modifier key can be bound separately from the debug overlay key. The key to toggle GUI can now be rebound, and the key to toggle spectator shader effects, such as when spectating an Enderman, can now also be rebound. This changelog has more details of changes to debug renderers, graphical presets, quality of life improvements to the menu UI, technical changes, including the new stopwatch command, which keeps track of real time, and a whole host of bug fixes. We're going to end our news read there, but if you're interested in any more of that stuff, check out the Minecraft.net changelog, linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
So I will confess that I completely missed the snapshot. It didn't come out on a Tuesday, and when I didn't see it on a Tuesday, I thought, okay, next week. And then I sent you a raid on Thursday, and you were in the snapshot. I was like,
Yes.
whoa, what? What's going on? But in a way, like, it was cool because, of course, then I got to see firsthand and like hear your first impressions and see what was going on. And obviously, I know we're going to have more details to talk about in the main show. But something that I noticed about the changelog for this new snapshot is a lot of the technical stuff under the hood, a lot of the accessibility changes, the graphical changes, menu settings changes. There feels like there's baby steps happening towards just quality of life changes for optional settings. We've got an email about that coming up, actually. And it's all good. Like, I think more options for players is long term going to be good. It's going to be a little bit difficult remembering where these new settings are, what like graphical settings, the fast, the fancy, etc., have changed to in terms of what they were before. So in a way, it does make them work like other video games that you're probably familiar with, but it's different for Minecraft. So there's going to be like a slight learning curve. But overall, I feel like a lot of these changes are pretty good.
Yeah, I think a lot of the graphical changes, especially, you can attribute to them refactoring the rendering code right now. We've been told that rendering is being split off to a separate processor thread, which is obviously a much more technical way of doing it, but it basically gets rendering out of the way of all of the gameplay calculations that take place, and is a step towards Java being slightly more optimized and having better performance, because Bedrock Edition has had great performance for ages because it's able to use that multi-threading, but that leads to complications like redstone behavior being different and that kind of stuff. Whereas Java Edition has always been on a single CPU thread, which makes it resource intensive for part of your CPU, and the rest of the CPU just isn't used in any of the stuff in Minecraft gameplay on Java Edition. Now that's being changed, it seems like they're opening up a lot of the aspects of rendering, taking a look at how they are done and saying, what can we give players more control over, what aspects of this can be fine-tuned to the player's benefit, and what aspects do players want to have control over for the sake of creating atmosphere in their worlds. Like, do they want the clouds to look better? Do they want the leaves to look better? Or are they much more interested in the gaming side of things and still keeping those options open to players? Which I think is obviously a great thing. Even if the game overall is going to perform better for everybody, I think it's great to still allow players a little bit more of that customization of their experience.
Yeah, I think the note on potential frame rate increases is good too. Like, I think there's a lot of people out there that are not as into Minecraft as you and I are, where we're streaming it and we're like looking for certain performance to make videos out of. But having that frame rate increase is just going to be a better experience. And I think one of the things that I've heard from some players that have tried Minecraft, just people that I know at like social gatherings and stuff that aren't necessarily big gamers, but there's a hurdle because Minecraft does sometimes look old. Like, it does look dated in terms of its graphics and how it works and stuff. And so if there's any kind of technical hitch that makes it frame rate low or performance heavy, then people are just like, why am I playing this older looking game if it's not going to run smoothly? So I think it's good that they're moving in that direction. The thing that I was thinking about as well in the lineup was the sounds and how they've changed the anvil sound, and it's something that I've just sort of accepted. But whenever it breaks live on stream, like, it is jarring. Like, it really is shrill when you're doing, renaming something in an anvil and then it busts in front of you. And so having that sound be a slightly lower volume, I think is great. I'm kind of wondering if there's going to be more granularity to that in the future, where rather than Mojang just saying it's a slightly lower volume, they're saying you can control the volume. Like, you can put it or blocks like this, at a certain level. Like, I'm thinking about the kind of sounds that you use a lot that players might want to turn down, like opening and closing chests, shulker boxes, anvil, perhaps something like a water column, like going into a bubble column. I can't think of anything else at the top of my head, but like a lot of any kind of UI interaction sounds, barrels maybe.
Yeah,
that would be good if that was lower, because like, well, for example, your storage system now on the survival guide, like as you go through a bunch of different chests and barrels and things, like that's a lot of creaking and opening and repetitive sounds that, if they are really loud, are kind of intrusive, whether or not you're creating content or not. Like it's kind of an odd thing to kind of continuously have to do.
One consideration I had when I was building the storage system even was how far away do I want the copper golems to be? Do I want to hear that constant confirmation that they're still working by having them open and close chests? And the range at which you hear that sound, I think, was adjusted a little bit in Snapshot, so it's not as bad as I initially thought. I can drop some stuff off on one side of the storage system, and by the time I've walked a few blocks away, I don't have to hear the copper golem checking every single chest in the row to find where the oak planks are stored. But like that's part of it, and I think it's kind of neat that we have a little bit more fine-tune, a little bit more control over that. Speaking of which, I believe that's the topic of our email that we're going to tackle this week. So as always, we'll move on into chunk mail. If you'd like to email the show, the listener email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Keep your emails to the show short and to the point if you can. It really does help us include them in the show more easily. Let us know what you're talking about in the subject line, and we can select emails for mailbag episodes like the one we're going to have next week as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Send those emails in, and Joel has the one for this week.
This is from Donaraf, a community miner member of our Patreon. Sound volume is the subject. Hey, Jonny and Joel. I wanted to chime in on sound volume and say there is definitely a mod for that. Most modded kitchen sink packs include Extreme Sound Muffler, which lets you individually specify the exact sound you want to mute or reduce the volume on. As Jonny mentioned, Vanilla Tweaks also has some options. That said, I would love to hear your opinion on potentially seeing tweaks to sound frequency variation to reduce the fatigue of hearing the same sound at the same frequency over and over again. Potentially even data pack options that Mojang could add. Donaraf was blown up by a creeper because he accidentally muted the Minecraft creeper_fuse sound with Extreme Sound Muffler. There are also links in the email that Donaraf has provided to the Extreme Sound Muffler mod, so we'll have those in the show notes if people want to go check it out for themselves. Obviously, you have to use Extreme Sound Muffler with caution if you want to survive longer than Donaraf.
Yes, yeah, the creeper explosion honestly is one that I'm fine being all the way up, mostly just because it creates funny moments as well, more than anything else. But yeah, I think I've played with, if not necessarily packs that were specifically designed, mods that were specifically designed to mute sounds and have more control over that. I've played with a lot of stuff that had that as an incidental part of adding new sounds in. Because often when people wanted to add more ambience into the world, you know, if you want stuff like insects buzzing around a pond or something like that, you get down to a river and you hear like crickets chirping or whatever, or mosquitoes or something like that, inevitably there'd be a volume control for people to whom that noise would just be too distracting, or they'd, you know, be looking around in their room for where's that fly in here, only to find out that it's in their headphones. So yeah, I think that there's definitely like a bit more of a customization angle to any sort of sound effect stuff that I think is great that the community has worked on stuff like this, even as Mojang tries to mess with the default volume and make the categories a little bit more exact for players.
Yeah, I think the idea of sound control is great, and they're adding some of that stuff in, as you mentioned. I like the idea of varying frequencies for some blocks as well, especially blocks that players mine a lot of, like dirt, grass, stone, etc. That's why my resource pack actually has the grass mining sound as dirt, which I get called out on sometimes on stream. People are like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like what it should, because they use the same grass noise on leaf blocks. And so when I break a leaf block in the game, it sounds like dirt. And that's when usually viewers are like, wait a minute, what's going on? And so with that, I think that they are starting to do that with new blocks. I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, shroom lights, amethyst blocks, amethyst crystals, and bamboo off the top of my head don't have the exact same breaking noise every single time.
Yeah.
I don't think. They certainly have different noises when you walk on them. Like when you walk across them, the footsteps noises are not always the same. And so newer blocks are doing it. And I think it would be a great idea for Mojang to revisit things like the grass block. Still keep like the iconic sound, but add like 3 or 4 variations of it so that when you're mining through something, it's not this constant like drone of the same noise. In some ways, though, you'd have to be careful because I think there's a lot of other, we'll call them memes in Minecraft, that some players find very satisfying, which is insta-mining stone. That kind of popping stone noise that you get when you mine stone with a beacon. I don't know that would be better if it was different frequencies, if it sounded a little bit different every time you mined a block, like 3 or 4 different times. Would that read at that speed? Like, it's going to be probably much more pleasant early game when you're just mining one block at a time. But when it sounds like popcorn going, like, at what point does that become a problem? Does it go the other way? Does it become more annoying when there's a frequency variation at speed versus when it's just at a regular, early game pace? So I imagine there's a lot to consider before they add sound variants, but I like the idea. That would be a fun toggle, in the sound settings or accessibility settings. Like, hey, if you find this really annoying and you don't like the same sounds all the time when you're mining, turn this on and get sound variants. If you don't like the sound variants, then you can turn it off. And I think that might be one way to go about it. But again, like, maybe data packs and maybe the creator community is just where Mojang is saying, like, look, like, this stuff is already out there, and maybe they want to leave it there. I don't know. But I do notice that when they add new blocks in the game, and as I've been playing around with new blocks that I don't use very often or haven't used in West Hill on the Sci-Fi Island, I'm noticing, oh yeah, iron has a different noise now. Oh yeah, shroom lights are really fun, because I grew some warped wood for the creeper farm, and I had to get rid of the whole tree, and I got rid of the shroom lights, and I was like, every time I mine a shroom light, I'm just like, I forget how much fun these are. Just the noise that they make is great. Like, I wish there was a way to make them make noise in the game without interacting with them. Like, if there was a way to have them be some sort of like instrument in the game, would be hilarious and fun.
Note blocks, maybe something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, though. I think it does happen in subtle ways for, if not every block in the game, then most of them, that there is a subtle variation in pitch as you mine them. And I think it's one of the smart decisions that was made very early in Minecraft's development as far as sound goes. Like, the same thing when you collect XP orbs, it plays like almost like a little jingle of randomized notes. And I don't know if that's it adjusting the pitch or if it's adjusting the speed, and the pitch is adjusted as a function of the speed increasing or decreasing. But you do get a little bit of variation in that. And that helps a lot, I think, with Minecraft's like faster sound effects, like instantly mining out stone and that kind of stuff, being a bit less repetitive. I think the things that people find a bit more grating are the ones that have those like higher treble sounds, like breaking glass, breaking grass, and a variety of other sounds like that have slightly kind of crunchier sounds. And so like, it's great that mods like that exist for some of them, and I don't know if the solution from a vanilla standpoint is introducing like alternate sound effects, and you could kind of like toggle between like muffled grass and normal grass or something like that, because I feel like that gets into the type of fine-tuning that the vanilla game just gets slightly too complicated with. Like, there are almost too many menus for you to go through to get to some of those. And if Mojang identifies what the pain points are, like stuff like the anvil noises in this week's Snapshot, they can tone that stuff down or recommend changes to the sound team, and the sound team can come back with something new. They sort of tried to do this with pistons somewhat recently, and then everybody sort of started making jokes and memeing about the way the pistons sounded, and disguised within that, I think, was some legitimate feedback about both the sounds that pistons already make being adequate enough for people who use them all that regularly, and it really just being about the range at which you hear them and not necessarily the quality of the sound itself, but also just that people didn't feel like the sound matched the block as cleanly as all that, and they wanted the mechanism to still feel like it had some weight behind it instead of feeling a bit kind of like plasticky or something the way it did before. I know a lot of people compared it to the sound of a fish flapping or something like that, so I think there was some sort of feedback along those lines, but they've dabbled in that stuff recently, so I don't think it's entirely out of the question that some of those other sounds get a bit of revision done to them as well. And we have a couple of people in our live chat who have experience with Extreme Sound Muffler and said that it even has the functionality where you can anchor it to specific places, so you can tell your mob farm to mute or muffle a lot of the mob sounds in that area, but not when you're out exploring the rest of the world. So if there's a specific location you want it to muffle, if you just don't want to hear the sound of mobs dying on campfires as you farm mob drops or something like that, but you still want to be able to hear creepers and skeletons and so forth when you're going caving, it seems to be an option that they've thought of in Extreme Sound Muffler. So that makes it, I think, a really well thought out mod. And so, yeah, that comes with a personal recommendation, even if I haven't used it myself. I think that's a really smart feature.
When I go to my zombified piglin donut farm in the nether to repair stuff and get some XP for labeling shulker boxes, I turn the volume on the game down to like 2%, because having that many zombified piglin angry at me constantly is just too much. Like, it's
same with the
not
Enderman farm. Like, yeah, that's
same.
how I do it too. Yeah.
Same idea. I would also argue that sometimes too many chickens in one spot, and I'm just like, my eye starts to twitch. I'm just like, nope, this is not, we're not doing this. Like, I managed to bring a couple of villagers back to the Mushroom Island, and I, in the process, also haphazardly kidnapped a chicken, and then it started laying eggs, and now I have a couple of chickens. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just put them over a hopper, and I'll have some eggs for whatever I might need later on. And as I was setting them up, I was just like, I'm going to put these about 20 blocks away from my storage system, just so I don't have to listen to them clucking constantly, right? And I have definitely turned down mob sounds to something like 50 or 60%. And it was a delicate balance when I was first trying it out, because I wanted to have zombies be less annoying, but I wanted to be able to hear creeper footsteps coming up behind me. So there's that really delicate balance in the game to try and mess with that. And I've gone the other way too. When I was playing Olive Fabric 5, I want to say, those mod packs always have a bunch of cool sound stuff, not just sound control, but like added sounds to the game, like walking over wood sounds like walking over wood, stone, dirt, etc. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. I found that the variation on footsteps, we even tried a mod like that on the Citadel for a while. I just found it was very distracting. And I don't know whether it was because it was too many sounds, like too different, too frequently, or whether it was just different than vanilla Minecraft. I just didn't get used to it, but I didn't like it. I ended up turning it off. Now, on the flip side, I remember I had a mod that added like cave ambience with like echoes and stuff. Yeah. That was cool. Like, that I thought was really interesting and neat, especially if you get into like a geode and it was kind of echoey and crystalline. And if you went to the end, there was a very specific, like almost antechamber, like there was almost a deadness to the end. So that, like, that kind of stuff I think is cool, but you can go overboard with like too much. So I mean, again, a tip of the hat to the sound team at Mojang, because like it's a lot to balance, even on a game as, you know, we'll say straightforward as Minecraft is in terms of the number of materials and the kind of sounds and the environment not being like quote unquote realistic, like you would have on like a Silent Hill game or a horror game where sound is like really, really important for gameplay. But I think that one of the things that happens with Minecraft is because the world is so vast that you have to have all these different considerations. And because it's a creative world where people do a lot of repetitive things, you can't necessarily have like a different sound for everything, because then it's just going to be sensory overload, if that makes sense. At least that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. And speaking of the world getting more and more vast, we have even more stuff added to it along with this snapshot. Let's get into the main discussion. The Mayhem is officially mounting. We're going to be talking about 25W41A, bringing our first look at the Nautilus and its zombified form, the Spear, and allegedly zombie horses spawning in survival. Although as I get into my experiences with it, at least, I didn't find any. So it remains to be seen whether or not the zombie horse is going to be spawning all that frequently, because I spent about an hour and a half, I think, looking into the snapshot on my Thursday stream and didn't see a single zombie horse the entire time. Didn't want to spawn them in just in case it somehow like affected the way they behaved or something, in case like creatively spawned zombie horses are going to be somehow different. So yeah, I don't have much to say on that score, but I can speak as to the others. How about you, Joel? Did you get a chance to look into the snapshot after you discovered its existence on Thursday?
No, because Friday is the Lego stream, and then Saturday I was back on the island because I hadn't finished what I had started, and then that's my last stream of the week until Tuesday, so I haven't been back. I do have that snapshot world, though, that I created for the Copper Age, so I can update that to the latest snapshot and bop in, because there are things I want to check out with the Nautilus. It might be more of a creative thing, because I want to mess around with some ice and water, and like I don't necessarily think I want to go and find that in the survival world, so I want to test a few things out to report on, but I have not yet gone in. But I did watch a couple of videos, and I've seen, you know, some stuff that you've done in the snapshots when I was there. after the raid. So one thing I'm definitely curious about is the Nautilus, because people have been comparing it to the Happy Ghast. Is it useful underwater? Like, what is it useful for? Like, so when you're on the Nautilus, what's your impression? Like, is it a mount for transportation? Is it for building? Like, what's the go-to use for the Nautilus?
So right now, my impression is that it's more for transport and just kind of zooming around on than it is for building. And that kind of stems from a couple of things. First of all, I found it quite fun to ride. It really helps, especially that we can craft the saddle now, because my first thought was, well, I have to go and find a dungeon or get like a leather worker or something, and then I realized, no, I can just go and find and kill a couple of cows. I found a shipwreck quite early to get a couple of extra resources, and then found a buried treasure off of that gave me a little extra plus a diamond. So I crafted a spear and then went to find a Nautilus. But the Nautilus I'll talk about first. The first thing that struck me was it's different to tame than horses are, because horses, you can kind of break them in. Basically, you kind of repeatedly click on the horse, regardless of whether you fed it anything. Eventually, it's going to accept you riding it, and you can put a saddle on and go from there. The Nautilus, you have to tame with a pufferfish first, in the same way that you have to feed a dog a bone to get it to be or a wolf a bone, rather, to get it to be obedient towards you. And it wasn't awful. Like, I managed to tame it with the first pufferfish. I'm not sure if that's automatic or if you need multiple pufferfish, and I just got lucky, but it seemed to be a one-click tame, both with that one and the zombie Nautilus, which I encountered later. And I didn't ever track down Nautilus armor in survival, so I can't really speak to how easy it is to find that, but having raided a couple of shipwrecks, found a couple of buried treasures, I think an ocean ruin once or twice, I didn't find any whatsoever. So that seems to be relatively rare for now, assuming that it's spawning as it's meant to in the loot chests. But the Nautilus makes a good first impression. I think it's a fun-looking mob. It's a nice sort of size. The player sitting on it looks a little bit goofy, a little bit fun. And then riding around on it has the speed of a swim with Depth Strider 3, which of course I didn't have because I was starting from a fresh survival world start. It's got a bit of momentum to it. I didn't get to find out whether or not it's compatible with Dolphin's Grace, but it seems like from the previews we've seen, probably not. And yeah, I'm kind of curious if there's ways you can speed it up, maybe potions, that kind of thing, stuff that I didn't get into because I wasn't far enough into the systems of a survival world with only kind of poking around a fresh world for an hour and a half. But the reason I say it's probably more of a transport than it is for building right now is because there is still the penalty to mining speed that happens whenever you ride anything. If you're riding a horse, if you're riding a Happy Ghast, typically you mine stuff slower. And the same is currently true of the Nautilus. So without Aqua Affinity, going down to like the underwater caves, thinking, oh great, I've got like Breath of the Nautilus, I can swim around as much as I want to, immediately tried to mine some like redstone ore and iron ore that I found in the bottom of an underwater ravine, and it was tediously slow, to the point where it would have been faster for me to get off the Nautilus, stand on solid ground to mine it, and then get back on the Nautilus. Even later, when I gave myself Aqua Affinity using an enchant command, it still didn't improve to the point where it was like mining on the surface. So I think it needs a buff to mining speed, or perhaps more accurately, the removal of the penalty to mining speed, if we're actually going to build with it underwater. Because a lot of the process of building is, oh no, I placed that block wrong, I need to break it. and clearing out areas underwater especially is also going to be a concern. So I think that's maybe part of that. Outside of that, like I said, it makes a good first impression, but I'm still not certain I will end up using it all that much in the long term, because it seems like a one-stop shop for a lot of effects that if you spend longer in a survival world, you can acquire on a more convenient basis. Things like, water breathing, you can get that from conduit power, and the transport options, I think, are going to be outstripped by players acquiring Depth Strider, maybe making more advantageous use of Dolphin's Grace, and I think if the mining debuff stays, I think it's going to be much more convenient for players to just kind of walk around on the ocean floor with a conduit nearby and do all of the mining from a standing position and just get like what they would normally get out of that. I also find that right now there's not enough visual or auditory feedback when it takes damage. I assume that's something they're going to be working on, but when I got hit by, like, I ended up antagonizing a couple of other Nautili just to see what the dash attack was like, and it didn't seem to have much of a sound effect or a reaction from the creature when it dashes at you to attack or when you get hit by that attack. And so it sort of overrides the player's kind of tick noise when you take damage, and it just didn't really seem like the mount taking damage registered anywhere other than the health meter that's above the armor bar. So I think maybe a couple of things like that are going to show up in upcoming snapshots, because right now there's not a lot of visual feedback. And the charge behavior is fun. I can see that working in a better way than the camel did, because I think the camel already got like kind of... It was automatically obsolete in the sense of like there are other land mounts that are available that are faster, that are can jump in the same way that the camel's dash was supposed to help it like clear ravines and obstacles and stuff. I think underwater, because you have more of like a complete spherical range of motion, the dash is useful in a lot of other ways than just moving horizontally. And the muscle memory is the hardest part of that, because I'm used to flying the Happy Ghast around a little bit by now, where you have to look up to go up, look down to go down, but you can hold the spacebar to ascend because there are no like other behaviors linked to the spacebar when you're riding a Happy Ghast. You try and do that with the Nautilus, and it ends up dashing because the spacebar is the dash in the same way that it is for jumping when you're on a horse. And so that is another conflict with both Creative Flight and Happy Ghast Flight that's just messing around with my muscle memory for how I control these creatures. It wasn't the end of the world, but it still felt a little bit disorienting to try and like hold the spacebar to go up, which I'm used to from other controls in the game, and then I'd find myself, oh wait, no, I have to release that to move around, and then suddenly I'm dashing forward when I don't intend to. The precision of those controls is something that requires a bit more finesse on behalf of the player and a bit more experience on behalf of the player, that it's not 100% intuitive the first time if you're used to other means of navigation in Minecraft.
Yeah, I find that games that have the jump key as up and the crouch key as down whenever there's any kind of flying involved is usually much more intuitive and makes a lot more sense. Now, I haven't ridden a Happy Ghast yet, and obviously have not ridden a Nautilus yet, so I can see that being not just a conflict of muscle memory, but also like a conflict of speed. Like what I want from this is to have the navigation be secondary and be able to focus on what I'm doing, either traversing or building or mining, depending on what the project is. And it sounds to me like, pressing shift probably dismounts. Like you probably jump off of it if you hit shift, like a boat. Yeah. Right. So there is no real down. You can't just, which is silly. And same with the Happy Ghast. Like you're floating on a thing. How can I not float directly down? I feel like that's an oversight. And it's disappointing that you can't do that with the Nautilus. I know it's deceptively large when you see it on screen compared to when you're riding it. It's like a block and a half or something when you're on it. Like it's bigger than you. Like you're not riding this tiny. It looks like a single block. It looks like it's the size of not a sheep, but maybe like smaller than a pig when you see it on screen on video. But then when you see a player on it, you're like, oh wow, okay, this thing is like a block and a half square. Can you see around it? Like in the same way that, or I guess the opposite way, that a Happy Ghast blocks a lot of the view when you're trying to look down. Can you see freely around the Nautilus? Like, can you see any of it when you're sitting on it? Or is it just like a horse where it's like there's the head in the way or something?
I think you can see a little bit of it, but it's much less intrusive than either the horse or the Happy Ghast, because it's slimmer and you're sitting sort of on top of the shell. There's nothing protruding from that side of the shell because the head of the creature is behind it. So you really don't have... It sort of like moves itself by pushing itself backwards, but of course to you, you're just riding it and going forwards. And so you don't end up with too much distraction in the way, which I think is one of the positives of the way it's designed so far. I think it's quite neat. It sort of feels odd that you're still clearly riding it, but it doesn't feel like there's anything underneath you whilst you're traversing it in first person. In third person, I think it looks quite fun because you can see yourself from behind, and so you can see the Nautilus kind of puffing away underneath you as it kind of moves. And yeah, I think the design of that is pretty neat. It's pretty fun. I just think it needs a couple of tweaks to mining speed in order to make it more viable for the kind of underwater activity that I imagine players will want to go after it with. I think in combination with the spear, though, it actually gets quite interesting because the spear has that charge attack where you hold down the right mouse button or the secondary action button, since you can now rebind those, and you sort of charge forward with the spear, and your momentum there adds to how much damage you're dealing. Well, of course, the charge that the Nautilus has, the dash attack or the dash behavior, is another way of gaining momentum incredibly fast and suddenly, and in a way that, you know, players won't necessarily be reacting to as fast if you're in a PvP situation. I ended up using that to farm fish because there were fish spawning in schools around the ocean, and because the spear allows you to hit multiple targets in a single attack, you can effectively dash through a set of fish, and they all just end up getting killed by the spear attack and rising to the surface, and you can kind of collect them that way. The same is true for getting ink. If you want that from glow squid or regular squid in the oceans, you can, you know, dash into a couple of them, and the attack is usually pretty effective. I was using a diamond spear, so I had one of the harder hitting versions of it, but I think it makes sense to have a means of, you know, riding around underwater and jabbing at as many squid as you want to collect ink or glow ink for signage and dyes and whatever else you need. So there's potential in that. Not to mention the fact that with under a bit of investigation, the spear can be enchanted with a lot of the same stuff that swords can. So looting is an option, which is very useful for players who want to use like any sort of mounted option to acquire drops that way. Like I think it makes a lot of sense. But the spear in combination with the Nautilus, I think, is a good bit of synergy for this snapshot. I think it's showing that these have been sort of developed with a lot of the same mechanics in mind, the momentum side of things working pretty well. So yeah, if it's cool with you, I'm going to go on to talk about the spear because I have thoughts. I have
Absolutely.
a lot of thoughts about the spear. So, of course, like I said, the first thing I did, I found a shipwreck. The shipwreck gave me a lot of iron, but then the shipwreck buried treasure that I found gave me a diamond. The first thing I did with the diamond was make a spear. And then I tamed a horse on a nearby island. I was looking for leather so I could make a saddle, found some cows, and then left one horse around so I could tame the horse. Riding around, slaying passive mobs during the day with a spear, and then a few skeletons and zombies at night was kind of like riding the Nautilus, more fun than I expected. There is something about the kinetic action of it and how intuitive it feels to just hold down the right mouse button and ride around, effectively like trampling stuff as you go and like riding stuff down. It feels good. Like it feels like a very intuitive system to, you know, somebody who's new to that kind of mechanic. And I've not really done a great deal of like mounted combat in other games. I've done a little bit in like Elden Ring, but obviously the combat system in that is very kind of finesse based, whereas this felt like you could really just hold down right click and like mow down a few zombies and so forth. Completely unenchanted in the spear, so it still took like a couple of hits to take out a zombie. But I like the fact that not only does your momentum count, but the momentum of the mob counts. So if you're charging at like a Ravager and the Ravager is charging at you, your speed, like both of your speeds contribute to how hard you hit the thing.
Right.
So there's potential there for like the faster moving mobs to be taken down. People pointed out, although I didn't get to try this myself, that like when Vexes or like, you know, creatures like that will fly at you, they take on a sudden burst of speed. And effectively you could just hold the spear up as they come towards you. And even if you're not moving very fast, their momentum is going to basically skewer them on the spear. And I think that's kind of neat. It's also got a longer range. And at first, when we saw this in the Minecraft Live presentation, I wasn't certain what kind of range it was going to have because it wasn't something that you could really kind of have them stand still and demonstrate, but it's a couple of blocks longer, it feels like, than what you can hit with a sword. And so for keeping baby zombies at range, keeping spiders at range, it works very well. Like, normally I'll get hit once or twice by a baby zombie. It'll get under my guard when I'm using a sword or an axe or whatever, and so I'll get a couple of hits. The spear can keep them away. It seems to have like a cone of effect and can also hit multiple targets, so even if you don't have the best accuracy with the spear, you're still able to keep a baby zombie at arm's length and not have it damage you, which I think is going to be really valuable to people who struggle with that kind of combat challenge. So, again, early impressions of the spear, really positive, and I haven't seen mobs fight with it yet, but I think it's really fun that piglins and zombie piglins and a couple of other mobs can spawn holding spears. We talked about it before when we originally got the announcement of the spear. I think it really feels right for their character, the kind of hunter-gatherer civilization that piglins have in the Nether. I think spears are the perfect fit for that, and while they don't spawn holding one very often, when I have seen one, I've gone, that looks instantly correct. Like, it just feels like their kind of weapon. So I think that's again contributes to the spear making a pretty good first impression.
Yeah, I agree with the spear looking the part with piglins and zombified piglins. I think I saw that on your stream, and it reminded me of the Minecraft movie. Like, it reminded me of the kind of society that they try to portray piglins as in that movie. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And it also looks really cool in the Nether if it's a gold tip spear, and just kind of matches everything and whatnot. I'm surprised. I mean, I guess piglin brutes are going to always have the axes, but I'm surprised that there wasn't more spears in the bastion that you flew by. I thought that might be a space where they might jack up the difficulty a little bit with the spear. I'm curious because I wasn't able to really read this from watching somebody else play, but from what I can tell, there doesn't appear to be a different animation with the spear to, one, indicate that you can hit more than one mob at a time, and two, does it animate different than like the sword of the axe? Does it look like it pokes away farther from you to indicate that you are hitting something farther away? Because I couldn't see, again, it was a small window on Twitch. I couldn't quite figure that out from a watching, even though you were first person, I was watching as like a third person.
Yeah, it doesn't have an animation in the same way the sword does for the sweep attack. It doesn't have that kind of curving arc in front of you that sort of says hitting multiple mobs. But I think it's really meant to hit multiple mobs kind of in a straight line, almost like a piercing arrow from a crossbow does.
Right, okay.
And so that's not necessarily something that's animated super, like, super well, I think it's animated well, but it's not something that animation could really assist your understanding of, I think is probably the better way of putting it, because I think the animation of using it from a first person perspective, it looks like a forward jab. You can't tell as easily that it's hitting like a further distance away, but that's all a matter of perspective. And I think when you swing the sword, it kind of goes down and off the screen a little bit when it's swung. So I think the spear staying on screen the entire time maybe can give the impression that it's jabbing stuff further away, but I think that's really more about feel than it is about the visual side of things. So I'm sure once you get into the snapshot and have a poke around yourself, literally, you will probably find that there's a certain feel to it that becomes intuitive, more so than just seeing it secondhand. The multi-hit, multi-target attack, I think, could potentially be really useful as an alternative to sweeping edge for bedrock players. I think that's where this kind of is fascinating to me. I haven't seen any extensive look at the jab attack and hitting multiple targets and how it distributes damage, because without the sweeping edge enchantment, swords will do full damage to the thing that you've actually clicked on, and then only like 1 or 2 points of damage to mobs in the surrounding radius. I don't know if that's the same for the spear, but it seems like the spear hits multiple targets all for the same amount of damage. So that has the potential in systems that currently use stuff like Trident Killers on Bedrock Edition to have a means for the player to just stand there and jab, and it could work pretty well. It's also the case that I believe there's a less of a cooldown on some of the earlier tiers of materials, so like wood and stone have less of a cooldown than like diamond and netherite do, meaning that it might be more effective if you put mending on a stone spear. You could click slightly faster and get the same amount of attack out of it if you're using it at a mob farm. Then, of course, you have to balance base damage and enchantments of other kinds and that kind of thing. But there's potential for it, and I'm curious to see how the community at large end up using spears if they keep those mechanics to them. One of the other things I can see the community using a lot, provided that some changes are made to it, is the lunge enchantment. This is brand new enchantment, never before seen, exclusive to spears, despite the fact that they can be enchanted with stuff like sharpness, looting, bane of arthropods even, that kind of thing, and of course unbreaking and mending. Lunge allows you to lunge forward from a ground perspective and hit a target that's further away. So great in PvP as something that can close the gap between you and an opponent, and then also with the amount of knockback that the spear has, it can keep them at range, so you have a really strong advantage in combat. I think this is why they have done what they've done with the durability, where lunge currently takes a massive amount of durability, especially depending on which tier it's using, but we'll get to that. The lunge enchantment, when used outside of a PvP scenario, actually allows you to kind of air dash in a similar way to how Riptide works on Tridents, but without the requirement of being in water. And so I used it with Lunge 3, which lets you travel a pretty decent distance, to basically leap from platform to platform, from tree to tree in a savanna biome. And while it's not omnidirectional the way the dash attack on a Nautilus is, or the Trident Riptide is, I think it seems to only affect your horizontal speed. It's pretty good. Like, as somebody who's played a lot of platformers, I played games like Celeste, I'm playing Hollow Knight right now, having that sort of extra dash to clear the space from one platform to another is really beneficial for platforming environment stuff. I can see people using lunge in parkour courses, and I've definitely seen people set up like little obstacle courses for themselves already with like a lot of like trick shot jumps and landing on slime pads and bouncing up and then air dashing to the next platform using lunge and that kind of thing. Really cool. Like, in terms of the minigame movement physics based stuff that people can do with the Minecraft sort of engine, I think it's a really fun ability and will be amazing for parkour courses. However, the problem is the durability, because currently lunge 1, every time you use lunge, takes 8 durability. Lunge 2 takes off 32 durability, and lunge 3 uses 128 durability per lunge. That's per left click.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's on any tier of spear. Assuming no unbreaking enchantment, you instantly break a wooden spear. It snaps any spear before diamond in 2 uses. And then diamond, I think you can get about 12 uses out of it, and netherite is about 16. Again, all without unbreaking, but the way unbreaking applies itself, it applies to each point of durability loss individually and decides, like, yes or no, whether it's going to decrease the durability. So you're not going to get a lunge for free. You're always going to be spending an absurd amount of durability. I think on average for like lunge 3, where you would be spending 128 durability, you're still spending on average something like 32. Because Unbreaking 3 is going to remove 3/4 of the durability damage that weapon would take, so you're still going to be eating through the durability on this thing. I think people said you can maybe click like roughly 64 times, and then a netherite spear is gone as well. And to make matters worse, lunge seems to currently be mutually exclusive with mending. So you are consigning this thing to the grave no matter what. You are snapping this thing over your knee regardless. I think that there's a few problems with this. First of all, it overwrites the left click behavior, making for an absurdly punishing misclick. I think, imagine you accidentally clicking with one of the tools in your hotbar and then it just snaps. It's like you've mined the wrong block with a pickaxe that has no durability left. It seems kind of absurd. It's not even a particularly effective attack because it closes the gap to the target, but it uses the base attack that the spear has, and it's not affected by the momentum that you would get from a charge attack. And I don't know if there's a way to finesse that, where you kind of do a jab and a charge at the same time, or take advantage of the momentum of the lunge when you're charging, but even that seems to be like you'd have a much better time attacking most PvE targets at range using the usual spear jab than you would with lunge. It seems like in that instance, it's much better used in a PvP context, and even then, you're looking at the weapon you're using to fight somebody breaking in like 3 hits most of the time. So I think the most common use you'll see for this in survival is going to be for traversal. It's going to be for platforming. It's going to be like, oh, I'm in a cave, I've got my spear on me, I want to dash across like a ravine to the other side so I can collect the iron ore that I see on the opposite wall. Let me use the spear and lunge across to do that. The same thing that they're talking about using the camel for when it's dashing across like small gaps like that. And so I don't see players wanting to use it as a traversal thing, especially in the case of like, you know, player-made minigame parkour courses. You don't want there to be a weapon that breaks halfway through the course and then you have to restart, because then you're constantly recrafting these things and having to re-enchant them. I think that's the major problem with this, is like spears are relatively cheap to craft. As long as you're not using netherite for them, then chances are you'll have a reasonable amount of resources on hand to make iron spears or diamond spears. It's only using one. It's like a shovel recipe at a different angle. But you'd still have to enchant them. So you'd still have to have a ton of lunge enchanted spears if you wanted to use it for a parkour course kind of setting. And I think lowering this durability decrease is a necessity if they want players to take full advantage of these things. Otherwise, I think it's going in the bin for 90% of players, because I don't see anybody wanting to stick with that kind of behavior long term. I just don't think people are going to use something that breaks after that few clicks.
It reminds me, in a slightly apples to oranges comparison, mending on bows.
Yeah.
People prefer Infinity for the numerous reasons of just not having to worry about arrows, and like there's all these different things you don't have to think about anymore. Once you get Infinity on a bow, you're like, great, I don't have to worry about that. It's awesome. But then mending on a bow, like great, like you're never gonna have to replace the bow, but then you've got to have arrows on you all the time and you can run out. And like I feel like most of the players that I see are using Infinity, not mending. I'm sure there's outliers, but majority of what I see. And the lunge on the spear, especially mutually exclusive for mending, really makes it something that even in a single player situation, it's like, well, you're just like, why would you craft anything fancier than the base? Right?
Yeah.
Like it'd be better if you're going to be using it to dash around a cave or explore the world, bring some sticks and some stone with you and just make stone spears. And when they break, they break. Like just you're using it like a pogo stick essentially instead of a spear. And just so I'm clear, left click is your basic attack with a spear.
Yeah.
And then is right click the charge? Like
right click is the charge.
Hold. Yeah. Okay. And so with lunge as an enchantment, you no longer have the jab. Like
you no longer have a base attack, so you're pretty much forced to use the charge unless you want to carve a hunk of durability off of this thing.
Yeah, it's an odd decision. I mean, obviously still early days Snapshot. I'm sure a lot of people have the same feedback.
Yeah.
And if you want to use the new thing, then like you're gonna have to make it useful for players. I like the idea of the traversal, like that to me, especially the comparison to like Hollow Knight or I can't remember the name of the new one, but those kind of games. I want to say Ori and the Will of the Wisps is one of the ones that I played that I was using the attack to cross gaps because you could at a certain level you get like a certain like dash attack or something. There's a little magic involved in that game. And I like that. And I think that's going to be easier from a player perspective than the camel dash. Like when I tried the camel dash, it just felt very very linear from the camel didn't felt like it jumped. It felt like it dashed straight, which doesn't feel like you want it to do an arc. Whereas chances are, if you're using the spear lunge for traversal, you're going to jump first, get yourself on an arc, and then hit your, at the top of your arc, you're going to hit your lunge, and then you're going to cover more ground and then come down on the other side.
Exactly.
So I feel like that's more in line with what players might expect and want from that kind of traversal, which I think is cool. It's not grappling hook level of traversal, but like it's getting there. Like it's not double jump, but it's close. Like there's some interesting things with it. But I agree with your assessment of the durability being questionably low, and especially if it's something that you can't. Well, I guess you could repair it, but chances are it would be the same way that you repair other weapons. Like you'd have to pump iron ingots or diamonds into these things to repair them before they break, which means netherite would be have to use to replace the netherite ones. Like people would just not make netherite spears. And that's weird. Like this, why would you make this weapon in the game and then add features to it, or add, I'm not sure whether it's called a feature, but add attributes to it that then deter people from making the cool one, like the most powerful one, where if you want to feel powerful on the back of a horse or running around at night, charging into things and just like owning face, it's limited time. Like that thing's going to break and then not be able to be replaced unless you want to put more netherite into it. So that's a weird way to present the spear in my mind.
Yeah, compare Riptide, because I think Riptide is probably the closest analog to something like this that we have in the game already. It's got the restrictions of you need to be in water to use it, or when it's raining or thunder, you can use it, wherever there is rain. You can't fly over a desert with it, but you can, stick to any biomes that have rain, and you can just spam click it. That uses 1 durability per use. It allows the player to reach speeds that actually, in terms of the calculation of how many blocks per second you're traveling, exceeds the sound barrier. It's like you actually, I looked up the table of it on the Minecraft wiki. If you're clicking somewhat regularly, without like tool-assisted clicking that would time out the intervals perfectly, you can still get up to about 375 blocks per second, which is like Mach 1.1. Wild fact, but yeah, really cool.
Nice.
But that's using 1 durability at a time. Obviously, the restriction is that you can only use it in water, but you can also use it multiple times in a row. There's like a small kind of charge up that you have to do. You kind of have to like hold, click, and then release to let it go. But people get used to the rhythm of that. And you can fly sort of almost indefinitely, like Thor with a hammer, sort of like flying around like that. And it's not going to break the trident. Meanwhile, with lunge, you can't sort of chain it together in quite the same way. And Riptide is also omnidirectional. You can do it in whatever angle you're looking at. That's the direction in which you travel. The lunge dash is only horizontal. It doesn't gain you vertical momentum except gravity assisted. So I don't think it is worth the durability cost, just factoring in the durability economy for similar abilities like Riptide. I think if you want it to have a more distinct durability decrease than just 1, something in the 2 to 5 range feels acceptable. Maybe add 1 additional point of durability loss per level of lunge, but don't make it like 128 durability. That just feels like a wild swing to me. The alternative would be, and I was discussing this with my stream chat, we were kind of brainstorming potential options here. Keep a higher durability decrease. I still think 128 is pretty steep, but if you want to balance it for PvP's sake, this is potentially where we're going with this discussion. Make it a higher durability decrease, but only have it decrease when the player hits a target. So if the player actually hits another player or a mob or something like that, then the durability decreases. But using it without that, you can still use it sort of indefinitely. Kind of the same way they were planning to only have durability on Elytra go down when you consume rockets to boost yourself, but you could glide infinitely, which I know they didn't end up going with. It was an experiment, but still a fun rebalance of the economy for that particular skill. I think it's going to make sense for that to be a possibility with the spear, of like only having it deal damage to decrease durability, and the rest of the time you could use it as almost like an infinite dash tool. But again, that produces the option of infinitely air dashing, which I don't know is necessarily something they want in the game. But I liken it to how fishing rods consume more durability when they get stuck in a block, or if they're used to fish an entity. It takes off more durability from the fishing rod than just doing a normal fishing action with it does. So there's potentially like a little bit of balance there, but even fishing rods don't break when you use them like once or twice. The only thing that really feels comparable right now is brushes. If you're brushing an armadillo scute, you can only really get 4 of those because it takes 16 durability off the tool each time, and then the brush breaks after 4 swings. But brushes are made out of copper and feathers, whereas these spears could be made out of netherite. So right. It feels like a little bit of a weird like false equivalents, not to mention the fact that armadillos will just drop scutes periodically for you anyway. So that sort of wraps up my overall thoughts on the spear. I think it's really cool. I think it adds interesting new movement tech to the game, but I think the amount of durability it consumes with lunge is just flawed. Aside from that, it has some really great potential, especially for roleplay, jousting, all that kind of stuff. I think it could be super fun. The last thing to cover is the complete absence of zombie horses. Because I did not run into one at all. I assume they are a high local difficulty spawn, but we tried to eliminate as many of the potential barriers to that as I could. I increased the day count artificially so that local difficulty was higher. I was playing on hard difficulty. I think the only thing that could increase it at that point would be moon phase and the amount of time I had inhabited chunks, which with a fresh world was not going to be much. But I was flying around in creative mode at that point, but mobs were still spawning on the ground. I expect the intent is still to make them as infrequent a sighting as skeleton horses, which is what I kind of hoped initially, because I didn't want there to be zombie horses absolutely everywhere, every night. But I didn't see a single one the entire time I was running around actively looking for them. And I spent several nights in this world kind of in plains and savanna biomes and the places we would expect them to spawn. So I'm not certain if there is a spawning issue with them right now, or if it's just something that, you know, it's a matter of fine-tuning. They might spawn more frequently in future, but they're not completely absent from the code as is, and, you know, that we'll get natural spawns for them once you've been around a biome for a certain length of time. But as it is right now, didn't see a single one, so can't really comment on their either them or their riders, how difficult they are to fight, anything like that. I will experiment more and see if I can track them down, but I'll also be looking to any snapshots we get this week to maybe rebalance that so that players can have that experience and give feedback on it.
The only time I saw one was in Exumavoid's video for the snapshot, which he had to spawn one in, and then immediately, you know, realized that he had to bring in some horse armor because, of course, they catch on fire during the daytime and die. So, like, if you're looking for one in survival, be prepared to somehow wrangle it, cover it, or put horse armor on it so that you can keep it alive. Because for me, like, outside of some RP of like having a weird zombie horse around your base if you want one, like, I don't see the point. You know, like, I guess having a zombie with a spear on the back of a zombie horse is just like a way to communicate more about the spear to players. Great. We always ask for that in the game. It's cool. But like, as someone that is looking for just the zombie horse, like, I don't, because I'm going to have to kill the zombie. Like, I'm not gonna, you know, like, I'm not gonna like be able to keep them both around, I guess. I'm not sure why you would. It just seems like an odd thing to be brought into the game with as much fuss around that spawning, because it's like, well, what am I going to use it for? Like, and that could be an end game thing, that could be just a me thing. It just, I don't know yet what, you know, use they are. I mean, same way you could say that about the skeleton horses. Like, those are just like a fun PvE challenge. You know, if you're in a difficult area and they spawn in during a thunderstorm, and then you got to deal with them. And I guess you get the skeleton horse as like a prize, and I guess the benefit there is that they can ride along the bottom of the ocean without having to breathe. So cool. But like, again, RP stuff, it's not necessarily necessary to the game or to progression or anything like that.
Yeah, I can't see people really going after zombie horses unless they're kind of they just want it for the bragging rights or whatever. They just want to collect them all, kind of thing. I also feel like it seems unlikely that we can breed zombie horses. I haven't tried yet with spawned in ones, but you typically can't breed any other zombie thing. They specifically said you can't breed zombie nautili. So I think breeding the zombie horse will be impossible, which means if you want the fastest zombie horse, you have to get lucky with random spawns and whatever stats it applies to them when they spawn in. So potentially that could level the playing field when it comes to horse races, if people want to just, you know, mix all the zombie horses together, have them milling around, and then just pick a random horse, and if you got lucky, you got the one that's faster, and you can kind of add some randomness to races that way, as opposed to people being able to breed up the fastest horse they can through enough time and effort. There's potential for stuff like that here and there, but again, fringe cases for how they might be used. I think the zombie horse is kind of the footnote of this snapshot to me, and so I'm looking forward to seeing if there's anything else added to them that makes them more interesting and unique, or if we're just looking forward to more updates to the Spear and the Nautilus as things go on. For now, we'll be keeping an eye out for snapshots this week and report back next week along with the mailbag, but that's where we're going to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about our show and some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can watch the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday. You also get to join Hangouts where you can let us know what you've been up to in Minecraft this month. We currently have 275 patrons, which is up an additional 5 from last week. There's always room for more. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons. That's Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. Just tell a friend about the Spawn Chunks and where they can go to listen. New episodes are available on Mondays on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. There's a video version on YouTube if you'd like to see some screenshots and some show notes. You can also go to the show note website, which is thespawnchunks.com, and that's where you can find the email, which is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com if you'd like to contribute to the conversation. The RSS feed is on the website as well, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the Render Distance, the extended version of the program.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch when I can, doing behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series and playing other games from time to time. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which is now on hiatus as the Hermits get ready for Season 11. We'll be back when they are. Outside of that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
I will point you towards the Citadel Cafe, which is my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. I'm on Twitch 5 days a week. It's twitch.tv/JoelDuggan, where I stream Minecraft, build Lego on Fridays. I have a new set coming after the Soundwave set, so that's going to be exciting. I will reveal that when the time comes. And spending a lot of time right now in Minecraft in the sci-fi area. And hopefully this week is when we will be updating to 1.21.10. So I'll have a little bit more to do around the area this time.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, even if you travel by Nautilus.